after I got my degree in urban planning, I started my career at the New York City Department of Transportation. Started working as a bus planner, and I was working on designing bus lanes across New York City. And I think what I appreciated right away was getting to envision these ideas and then like on paper and then translate them into real life. And that was like a very, very cool thing to get to do right out of school. And then over the next several years, I served in a number of different positions within the agency, including chief of staff to the commissioner, where I was a liaison for City Hall, and then later becoming the director of New York City's Open Restaurants program, now called Dining Out, which launched during COVID. And we really had to launch to, kind of help rethink and help the restaurants survive during the pandemic. But we really had to move very quickly and rethink how streets could be used and allow restaurants to open up on the sidewalks and in the streets. And I built out a team there and saw the program through its permanency, and then decided I was done with government for a little bit, and moved over to the private sector. Where I spent a couple of years at two different engineering firms. I'm sure we'll talk more about it throughout this time. But recently, about a year and a half ago, I actually made my way back to New York City DOT, where I'm currently serving as the deputy chief of our traffic engineering and planning program. And I'll talk more about what we do throughout, but I'm very excited to be here, and look forward to our conversation tonight. And I'll turn it over to Bridget.
Julie, that was great. Thank you so much. And Nicole and Tara for having us all. My name is Bridget. I graduated in 2018 with a major in environmental humanities and a minor in writing and rhetoric. I got to take career skills with Dr. Ryder, and I had a lot of courses with David Taylor. Um, Environmental humanities connected me to climate justice advocacy, and that has sparked a path that landed me also in government, actually, county government, after doing environmental public policy on the 2019 Climate Act that our governor is currently rethinking and pivoting from. But, we we work with what we're given. And my current role is at Cornell Cooperative Extension of Suffolk County as the grants and contracts liaison for anything to do with energy. Turns out that sorry, pause. I was just adding this at the beginning. Reading the climate policy in EHM and translating that between academia and people in the front lines of climate change, that turned out to be a really easy pivot into public policy and government. And so that's how that happened. And now I'm really excited to be in a role where I'm going to be getting to work on grants. I've been interested in writing for a very long time. And so now, as the grants contracts liaison, we just started up in the CCE Suffolk Energy. It's a brand new program area, and our first contract is with the New York State Energy Research Development Authority for the Long Island Regional Clean Energy Hub. The hub is one of 12 regional hubs across New York with funding through 2030, and we're meant to support statewide decarbonization and electrification efforts in the residential building sector, which contributes nearly 40% of greenhouse gas emissions in New York. That was found in the 2019 climate legislation. As the regional clean energy hub, whether we are connecting job seekers with career pathways in clean energy or helping home and business owners of all incomes access incentives and rebates to make their properties more efficient and affordable with a lower carbon footprint, our regional clean energy hub grant has two main focus areas. We do community programs related to home energy upgrades, as well as workforce development supports. The hub's work is to strategically deploy energy efficiency, home weatherization, and clean energy technologies across Long Island, with a specific commitment to supporting historically disadvantaged communities as a part of the state's goals to ensure a just transition to clean energy. The funding that we have from the NYSERDA grant is allowing CCE Suffolk to actually truly establish a foothold in the energy space, but we're looking at many different avenues in the energy arena to expand our impact and the benefits that we can bring to homeowners, small, medium business owners, and Long Island at large. So really what my role is going to be is working on the grants to support that build out. But we've also launched a dedicated workforce development program area at CCE Suffolk, and our current priority there is to work with NYSERDA and PSEG Long Island, the local utility, to connect people in green careers, but we will also be looking to expand to other connected industries in the future to support meaningful employment programs on Long Island. So, what's interesting to me about getting to work in clean energy infrastructure at CC Suffolk is that it is one of the largest, or if not the largest, extension in the state, and we are really interdisciplinary, kind of like sustainability studies was when I was a student there. We have a marine program, community education, agricultural science, and we also run several different nature-based summer camps for Long Island youth. And we also manage the Suffolk County Farm. And what's really exciting about being there is the leadership is always looking for opportunities for these program areas to work together. And I'm really excited to be part of building bridges between them through different grant programming. Uh, and I'll close it there. Thank you all. And I will popcorn it over to Darren.
Hey everyone, my name's Darren. I was part of class of 2018 as well with a bachelor's in marine science, and I took a few classes with Tara during Southampton time, and also got my master's in marine science at Stony Brook as well. So I came in, stayed in marine science, also met really good friends that I'm still friends with outside of school, even though we don't live in the same place anymore. But I'm currently in Oregon. I'm from California. I went to school in Stony Brook and then wanted to go back to the West Coast. So I'm over in Oregon. I'm the algae production research manager for a USDA ARS oyster breeding program. Um, and we're part of the Pacific Shellfish Research Unit. There's a lot of acronyms. This is the federal government, but mainly what I do is I culture algae, both dietary and harmful for the USDA oyster breeding program, as well as other collaborators within our unit, as well as OSU and um, other agencies at Hatfield Marine Science Center. So we're based at Hatfield Marine Science Center in Newport, Oregon, but I'm an OSU employee funded by USDA. But yeah, so I got bachelor's in marine science, and how I got into at least the algae world, it's super niche, but where I interned at the Gobler Lab as an undergrad for a couple of years, and then I got my master's with Chris Gobler as well. And so I finished in 2023, but I started work over here in 2022. So I was finishing up writing and everything from afar, but yeah, there's a lot of opportunities at Southampton, at least for anyone who wants to do marine science, which is really good. Yeah, and I think that's it for me. I'll popcorn over to Flynn.
Shocker. Hello everyone. My name is Flynn Delaney. I am class of 2020. RIP, rest in peace. It was awful. But so I graduated undergrad with my bachelor's in marine science. And I also minored in ecosystems and human impacts and GIS. And then I continued on through COVID in the graduate program at Stony Brook and got my master's in marine science in 2023. From there, I became the field and data scientist with Tillamook Estuaries Partnership, which is one of more than 28 now. I think they added a new one, but of the National Estuary Program. There's actually three that surround Long Island. One of them's affiliated with Stony Brook, so it's a great, national program to look into and get involved with. The Peconic Estuaries Partnership is affiliated with Stony Brook, but there's also the Long Island Sound Study and New York, New Jersey Harbors NEP that you can get involved with, no matter where you live around the island. Besides that, short plug for the NEP program. I am a field and data scientist, and so at TEP, my primary goal is to monitor and do the effectiveness research around our restoration activities, and monitoring and looking at critical habitats that it's in our charge to look after. So my love and my heart is seagrasses, and I got started with that at Stony Brook, working as an undergrad in the Dr. Peterson's lab, but also continuing through my master's there, looking at seagrass restoration work and continuing that now with my current job. It's part of what I do. Same species. It's the same species everywhere in the northern temperate environment. And so I get to still work with that species I was researching as an undergraduate. But we do a lot of work on the West Coast. I should say I'm based in the West Coast now. That totally misleading. But yes, I'm also on the Oregon coast. Darren and I do our partners, so we moved out to the West Coast together, and we are doing our work in concert, which is really fun. Um, and so I work a lot with the salmonids, different salmon species on the West Coast. As you can imagine, Oregon loves their salmon species. And because a lot of them are ESA listed, we get a lot of funding through there as an umbrella species to do a lot of great critical habitat research. Working in Oregon, I've worked a lot more in terrestrial realms than I was used to at Long Island, or on Long Island, I should say. Um, and I got to do a branch out from there, but taking a lot of the foundations from what I learned with the all the experiential classes. I took as many as I could. So the Semester by the Sea program, the SoMAS affiliated, what's it called, tropical marine ecology, study abroad courses, everything that I could possibly do, I took, and that really gave a great foundation for what I'm doing now, which is awesome. With that, I'll pop over to Al.
Hey everyone, thanks. My name's Al Beatty, class of 2010. Um, let's see. It's really cool hearing everybody's journeys, and I think I have a lot in common with some of you. I would say my career post Stony Brook has been a bit winding. So, if anybody feels like you have like a lot of interests and you're not sure, how it's all gonna shake out, you'll be okay. I think I might have that in common with a few of us here. So I majored in environmental studies. I also majored in anthropology, and I was part of the honors college and was able to do the study abroad program in Madagascar while at Stony Brook, which was really cool for that combination of interests. After graduation, I really thought I was going to go into the sort of naturalist environmental education route. I had done some of that work during over the summers and things. And I did that for about a year. I worked for a national park in Ohio, and then sort of went into education, tried to be a classroom teacher for a little while. That wasn't the best fit, but it made me realize, because sort of where I was teaching in DC, and that being sort of my first time living in a really urban environment, how interested I was in environmental questions as they relate to like how people organize themselves, and how our culture intersects with the environment. And so I ended up going to grad school for urban planning with sort of an interest in urban planning and climate intersections, as well as environmental justice. I worked as a transportation planner for 5 or 6 years, temporarily down in Philadelphia for their regional planning government, and then for a nonprofit focused on zero emission transportations. I'm now working for NYSERDA, which Bridget mentioned, the New York State Energy Development Research and Development Authority. I work on our NY Sun team, so all things solar. NYSERDA does a ton of stuff, but I'm in our solar funnel. And more specifically, I work in our portfolio of projects that we call the Solar Energy Equity Framework. So the CLCPA, the Climate Act, has a carve out for a certain number of the benefit of the public dollars that go into implementing that act need to flow to what the state labels as disadvantaged communities, which is a complicated topic. But my team is in charge of implementing the programs that are meant to flow to income eligible customers living in those geographic communities that are identified as high priority. So very much a sort of taking policy and where the rubber meets the road of like, what does that look like to actually do and to get those dollars out the door and to get folks benefiting from our programs. That's my day-to-day now. And I think we've just got one left. Joanna? Pardon for pronunciation, if that's incorrect.
No, all good, all good. Yeah, thank you all so much for being here. I'm really excited to be joining. So my name is Johanna, and I think I might be the most recent graduate in this group. I graduated in 2022 with a major in ecosystems and human impact, and my minor in geospatial science. I'm from New York City originally, but I'm currently based in Berlin, so it's 1 a.m. here, so if I am speaking a little quietly, it's because everybody is asleep. Um, but yeah, I actually transferred into Stony Brook in 2019. I was originally studying at Juniata College in Pennsylvania, where I was studying wildlife conservation, and I did my freshman year there. And then transferred to Stony Brook partly because I was really interested in Stony Brook's connection to Madagascar, and that will play a really big role in my the work that I've been doing now. Um, but yeah, I came to Stony Brook University and very quickly joined the sailing team at the university and took some classes with Tara and also with Dr. Patricia Wright, who I believe gave the Earthstock speaker's note recently. And in my senior year, I took her primate conservation class. I don't know if anybody else has taken that. I do recommend it. And this was when I really met Dr. Patricia Wright and began kind of volunteering in her lab. And after I graduated, I had still kind of been talking about talking to Dr. Wright about potentially, I don't know, helping out or volunteering at Centerville Bio, the field research station in Madagascar that is in collaboration with Stony Brook. And we kind of agreed that maybe I could come a little bit later because I had originally wanted to study abroad there, but because of COVID, I wasn't able to. And so just kind of, I was keeping that in mind, but I graduated Stony Brook, wasn't quite ready to finish. So I went on the summer in Tanzania program through Stony Brook with Tara. And that was very fantastic. I highly recommend that. And then I spent my summer after graduating working on the West Coast in the Salish Sea as an environmental educator and deckhand on a 110-foot historic tall ship called the Adventurous, where I was teaching students kind of all ages, all the way up to age 65, different skills in kind of in maritime skills, but also marine ecology, navigation, and this was honestly a really fantastic opportunity to combine two things that I really loved, which was sailing and also environmental science. And then shortly after that job ended, because it was a seasonal position, I was on my way to Madagascar, where Dr. Wright had hired me to be Centerville Bio's communications officer. So I was managing the research station's social media platforms, their website, and also doing a lot of kind of journalism work and communications work, which I, hadn't studied particularly, but was very much learning on the job, and kind of combining that with an interest in science communication. And that position also gave me the opportunity to just shadow a lot of researchers in the field, everybody working from health initiatives to lemur ecology and primate ecology, which was something I became very, very interested in. And that got me started thinking about maybe pursuing my master's also in conservation. And I then left that position to start my current program. I'm doing my master's in international nature conservation in a dual degree program between the University of Göttingen in Germany and Lincoln University in Aotearoa, New Zealand. And the timeline here kind of gets a little messy, but during the time that I was in Madagascar, I met my partner. He is the artist in residence at Centerville Bio. His name is Alain Rusulu, and he is a Malagasy wildlife illustrator and artist, really talented individual. And we decided to kind of combine our kind of shared passion for art and storytelling and science and conservation to create a small conservation NGO called Ulunala. which supports Malagasy artists, educators, and conservationists in combining creative expression with conservation. So we have a couple of programs running in Ranamafana, which is where Center Val Bio is based. And we are working on building Madagascar's first art residency program for Malagasy artists who want to use their art for conservation. We have a nature journaling program for young students in the Ranamafana Nature Center. And then we also support some grassroots women's collectives and also community collectives who are focused on kind of community-based natural resource management. And because of this nonprofit, which was again very much learning on the job, I decided to also pursue an online MBA program, so a master's in business administration, so that I kind of had a better sense of how to run a nonprofit. And I graduated with my MBA earlier this year. And yeah, and now, thank you, Flynn. And now working on finishing up my master's in nature conservation. So that's all from me.
I have to say, even though I knew at least part of some of your journeys, I am absolutely amazed at everything that this group of panelists have accomplished. And I have so many questions, but I definitely, we've already gotten questions in the chat. And again, if people have questions, if you want to raise your hand, we can do that. But I figured I'd start with some of the questions in the chat. And one of the ones that I think kind of ties a lot of your different experiences together, including kind of feeding off of what Johanna just said, is thinking about, and this question's from Lily, how government and not-for-profit and the private sector's roles differ in terms of impact and culture, because I know many of you have kind of moved through those different groups. So I don't know if there's who would like to speak on, maybe throw out what your experiences were like. And again, wherever there's advice to be given, we enjoy the advice, but also just thinking about, what is it that you took away from your own experiences, or why did you decide to be where you are currently now versus some of those other paths?
I'm happy to kick it off and others can, feel free to jump in. So as I had said, I started in the public sector, was in the public sector for quite some time, and then decided to do a little stint in the private sector. I think the biggest differences that I found, my work with New York City DOT, we were really coming up with projects, implementing them, seeing them right on the ground. And my work in the private sector, specifically engineering firms, that's the only experience I've had, so can only talk to that. But you're really doing work for a client, so you are never the client. And I think for myself, growing up in New York City, I have had this vision and dream of making the city a better place. And you really get to do that in the governmental sector. While you're still working maybe for certain cities, like I was working kind of across the US when I was in the private sector, and that was really cool to see how different cities function, how different states work. Ultimately, I wanted to come back to New York City and kind of help the city grow in another way. So I think that would be my biggest takeaway between the two. Other than that, work-life balance is very different between public and private sector. So I have a little baby right now, and it's been much better for me to be back working back in the public sector, knowing that at 5 p.m. I mean, this is not every day, but most days I can leave, spend time with my kid, and don't have to think as much about work at night. Whereas in the private sector, it was kind of a 24/7 operation.
I just wanted to say, to add on to that, Julie, which was great. Working for a national entry program they can take a lot of shapes. So we have partner institutions that are all over the country, but they can choose to form in many different ways. My estuary program is a nonprofit. It's a very small nonprofit in rural Oregon on the coast. I would say that's a big thing when comparing the government and nonprofits is size. You are very when you're hired by a nonprofit, you're usually like handful of employees, if anything. So there's about 20 full-time employees at my nonprofit, but I work with government partners and other national estuary programs. For example, I think the Puget Sound, which is based in Seattle, that's a part of the state government there, and they get national estuary program funding. And then the Peconic Estuary Program is affiliated with the University of Stony Brook. So many others are affiliated with universities, and it's just what serves their areas better. Because we're so rural, we got to kind of do everything ourselves as nonprofits. We don't have like a university that's present in our area to support us with the infrastructure and all that good stuff. So that's a big thing with working for a nonprofit is lack of infrastructure, but that gives you a lot of flexibility to form the program in the way that you want. So even though I've in very early career, I've had a lot of say in how the restoration and monitoring has been developing in my area, and it's been really rewarding. That does come with a lot of work that goes into that. But comparing it to other programs that are more government funded or our government partners, as the tides sway in the political realm, those can really dictate what your goals can outline and certain things like that. National estuary programs are funded through the EPA. So we do feel that sometimes, and most nonprofits are grant funded. Most grants are coming from the government themselves when it comes to conservation and restoration and endangered species actions. And so you do feel all of that pretty significantly when those political climates change and shift.
Yeah, and just to add to all of that as well, as I mentioned, I'm an Oregon State employee, but funded through USDA, and we're based at Hatfield Marine Science Center in Newport, Oregon. So at Hatfield, there's a bunch of different federal and state agencies here. So there's Oregon State, there's USDA, U.S. Fish and Wildlife, EPA, Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife as well, and they all kind of are working together but also separately at the same time. And as one example is there's a lot of contractors here. NOAA's here, and they have their own kind of entity within Oregon State that they provide funding for and have a little bit more flexibility with those employees compared to fully federal employees. So at least on my team, we have a portion of employees that are Oregon State employees and then a portion of employees that are actually USDA federal employees. We're all getting paid by our USDA budget, and that's for the Pacific Shellfish Research Unit. But the way money flows and kind of the responsibilities of different scientists and their teams vary. So I'm in a pretty interesting spot being part of the husbandry team. So the main unit is four scientists and their respective technicians, and they each have their goals that they have to complete or objectives they need to complete for their 5-year plan. And I'm kind of helping all of those scientists, me and the 3 other people that are part of the husbandry team. So it's been kind of nice being able to work with the USDA folks and again being funded by them, but also work with any other OSU or any other ODFW, other agencies that want to also get some of our oysters or have any expertise from that they want from us to engage with field work as well. But it's definitely different than my experience being at Stony Brook at the Marine Science Center. It's only Stony Brook at the Marine Science Center. There aren't any other agencies, so it's just the Stony Brook PIs, and they're renting out space in the Marine Science Center to do their work, which is really nice because it's a nice tight knit community, but it's not as open, at least to directly to talk with other federal agencies when you're in the same workspace. But yeah, sometimes the objectives are a little broader for larger federal government programs, but at least in my position, it's been kind of nice because our unit's fairly new. I've been treated like a professional. I get to do all the things I've been wanting to do and also provide advice for scientists and that don't have the expertise that I have. So pros and cons to both the private and public sector as well.
I could just add to the majority of my experience is in government with some nonprofit, but I've worked in several government levels, state, county, different counties, as well as town. And so I will say, I think it also very much, I made the assumption, I worked in Rockland County, then went to Westchester County, made the assumption that, we're just across the river, we'd be very similar. Wrong assumption, very wrong assumption. So I think it's really safe to be reminded that although it's government, different levels have very different cultures, very different expectations, very different connections. So I think also where you are geographically, Rockland is a tiny triangle. Westchester is much more politically connected and has a lot of other things going on with over there. So I just wanted to keep that in mind too. If you're thinking of the government space, there's a lot of options, and obviously with the political climate, county executives, legislature, funding, all that stuff is tied into. So just wanted to add that layer as well.
Do you think it's interesting we have, people that have, as you said, have kind of different layers of whether you're in government, not for profit, but also the geographical expanse that we have currently. We're global at this moment. So thank you, Johanna, for being up at 1 a.m. in the morning. We do appreciate that. And we've got Oregon over there. I'm not going to try to figure out the math right now in my head. It's late enough here. I'm too tired. One question, and we've got some really great questions in the chat. I'm definitely seeing a couple of questions that have come up about kind of thinking about students who are going to be recent graduates, and kind of figuring out, what are potential paths? Like, how do you figure out what that next step should be for you, whether it's thinking about graduate school and the concerns of you've got experience but maybe not the grades, or how do you take that next step, and kind of thinking about what it is. I'm trying to combine some of these questions a little bit together because I think a lot of students are at that point of going, what's next? And maybe what were the questions that you thought about and were helpful for you to answer in deciding where to go right after graduation?
If I may start, I think when I was at Stony Brook, I had this idea that right after my bachelor's, I needed to go straight into my master's. And I believe it was you, Tara, who reminded me that, maybe going into graduate school without actually knowing that I wanted to go to graduate school, I probably wouldn't get as much out of it as I wanted. And I instead tried to think of kind of my, recent graduate experience more as a kind of trial period just to see in which direction I wanted to work. I knew I wanted to work within the field of conservation, and but I didn't exactly know kind of in which realm, whether that was policy, whether that was education, whether that was more on the research side in wildlife ecology, or and I did this kind of seasonal position working as an environmental educator. I explored also roles in kind of science communication, doing a lot of environmental blog writing for various NGOs. And I do recognize, I had the privilege to do a lot of that. A lot of that was either volunteer work or, kind of a seasonal, I think in the sailing world, you're usually not getting paid that much. So, I had the privilege of being able to do those things with the knowing that, I was living at home with my parents when I was in New York and everything. So I do recognize that's not necessarily an option for everybody, but it was through the connections at Stony Brook, specifically Dr. Patricia Wright, that I was able to kind of branch out into Madagascar. So I think, long story short, for the people who are graduating soon, there's never any harm in, just kind of taking your time to explore which, path might be of most interest to you. And it might be, one thing, and then you find something else. And, as we've kind of seen through all the speakers here, it's kind of a winding road and you might find your way back to something. And, but yeah, taking advantage of just asking, events like this, or even just asking professors, doing these kind of informational interviews with people in various roles that you find inspiring, and just seeing what kind of opportunities are out there.
I know we also have a question. So if you'd like to ask your question, and then again, maybe we can hear a little bit more about kind of what people's thought process was right as you were getting ready to graduate and thinking about what's next. Because I know that is, for many people, including myself way back when, a scary question. Um, but if you want to throw your question out, I can see your hand is up.
All right, thanks so much. So, oops, is this, am I unmuted? Okay, perfect.
We can hear you.
Okay, perfect. So, yeah, thanks so much for the panelists. It's really great to hear all this like very diverse experience, and it's great to know everybody's in different locations. So, I just have a quick question as a current PhD at SoMAS. So, I'm also doing my research at the New York State Center for Clean Water Technology, doing the wastewater and drinking water treatment stuff, and also a little bit of the greenhouse gas monitoring and modeling. So, as a PhD student, really want to hear your perspectives on like, is there any chance for us to land a job or career in your industry? And also, especially as an international student, because I know a lot of job in the public sector do require the green card or citizenship. So really want to know that kind of situation. All right, that's my question. Thanks.
So I say, I think that actually because a couple of students have also reached out, I'm getting some things that I think are getting directed at me. If any of you have jobs or internship opportunities that you know of within your organizations, please share, whether it's here or even in the future. If you get it out to me, I will always share, including with Mariana. But that's a great question. Like, what, for what you're doing, what opportunities are there right now?
Oh, and go
I'll
ahead.
just throw out
Oh,
there
yeah, go
that
ahead.
my job will be having a position coming up soon, so I just want to throw that out there for folks. It is probably not a PhD aligned position, but for some of our undergraduates, it is a community engagement coordinator position that is not being flown yet, but we'll be probably rehiring in the next couple months. So I'll pass along to Dr. Ryder once that comes out so she can disseminate it. And if you're looking to move to coastal Oregon, that's also a big thing to consider. But it's a great position that is engaging and educating youth, but also adults we're a big tourist area, not unlike, Eastern Long Island. So we are trying to engage folks there, and we teach folks about the natural world. We collaborate with local tribes and people in the government sectors and local landowners, and we have a lot of forestry here as well. So we do a lot of just general natural resource and environmental education. But on your topic, after going, I did my master's, so now my PhD at Stony Brook. But a big thing and this ties into the question at large about like what to do after graduating. 2020 kind of told me what to do. So I luckily applied to grad school before, and I did that right after graduating from my undergraduate, but in a very unique situation, graduating during the first instances of COVID and going to grad school. It's honestly was a great time to do graduate level courses because that's all I could do, as we were all locked in. But after doing my graduate program and loving my work with restoration, I worked through Dr. Peterson's lab with the Shinnecock Bay Restoration Program. We were one of the arms working with that. So I knew I wanted to do restoration. That is the reason I got into this field and what I wanted to continue to do on the groundwork. And so because of my connections I formed at the graduate level and the undergraduate level at Stony Brook, I really liked that I stayed in the same school, even though people will say, might discourage you or not be neutral towards that topic. I think if it's the lab you want to work in, you should work in that lab no matter what school it's in. But I really liked that I got to carry over the people I was connected with. Dr. Kurt Bretsch, I ended up TAing for him as a graduate student, even though I took his class like two semesters before. So that was really great. And connections that I made working in the Shinnecock Bay Restoration Program and working with the Peconic Estuary Partnership is why I knew about the National Estuary Programs that got me to the nonprofit that I'm in today. The nonprofit world, for your question specifically, isn't as grants can inform what type of employees can be hired off of those grants, whether they're international or US citizens. But most of the time, that isn't a stipulation of the grant. So nonprofits are a great avenue to do some of the work, but nonprofits tend to be very hyper local or like global. But the hyper local ones, like the one I'm working with, even though it's federally funded, it's really great. You get to do a lot of great work, like at the smaller level. The bay that I'm working off of is about the same size as Shinnecock Bay, which is the bay off of the Marine Station. So it's not huge, but for the Oregon coast, it's pretty big. So the take your connections and try to look around where you want to live. But there's a lot of smaller nonprofits that don't have great, 20-year-olds in their social media departments or have the money to spend on their website development that are out there, that are looking, that are hiring, that LinkedIn isn't a great place to find those folks. It is going on like public forums, going to government websites that like government job boards and that type of thing, where you will find those folks. So, it might take a little more searching and digging for those more smaller organizations, but they're out there and they definitely are hiring too.
Yeah, I was gonna say some of this as well. I feel like in New York City right now, on the visa front, we are not allowed to hire anyone on a visa, which is really unfortunate. It was not the case in the past, but right now that's the situation we're dealing with. And so the way we've gotten around that is to hire through consultants, and we hire consultants who, like, you would work for a consultancy agency and we would hire you through them. And so that is a way, maybe something to think about is like, rather than looking in the government sector, looking in the private sector where they will hire, and maybe private sector that works on jobs that you would have wanted to be working on. So that's one thing. Secondly, New York City DOT is constantly hiring. I am going to share some links in the chat, and can also share them with Tara after this. But my team specifically is hiring. So for those folks who are either in EDP major or have some sort of planning or engineering background, feel free to contact me. Tara can share my email as well, and I'll share it in the chat.
I can jump in to the similarly, NYSERDA is almost always hiring if you have any interest in anything touching energy efficiency, transportation as well. Particularly internships, they tend to kind of come in cycles that connect with the school year. And I think we have like a SUNY to NYSERDA connection that I would have to follow up with the details on. But do look there. I can't speak to the eligibility question, but the kind of the more broad question around, what to do next. I really can't stress enough that like you're not gonna like box yourself in by trying something. I think it can feel like there's a lot of pressure when you're in school looking out that like this next decision is gonna be like dictate the rest of your life. And in my personal experience, that's not really the case. And I think if you can sort of identify like the beating heart under like what it is that you're interested in and what it is that you want to do, focus on finding opportunities where you can articulate something about that opportunity that connects to that beating heart, right? Because you're going to start to build your story. And if you get to a place where you realize you want to pivot, being able to just tell that story, like, this is what I got out of this experience, this is how it brought me here. I think it can be a little less rote and a little more personal sometimes. And just a last note, touching on the grad school question, I'd echo Johanna's point about, again, in my experience, which was more in the like professions versus like a academic research focused track. I went to grad school after a few years working, and I think that like that grad school experience was a different grad school experience than the one I would have had if I had gone straight through, because all of the work that I had done and all of the places I had been other than undergrad sort of informed how I was taking in that material and interacting with people. There were people who did my program straight through, and I think they had good experiences as well. So it kind of feels like non-advice, but truly like try things, try it, and you'll find out really fast what you like and what you don't like.
Can I just add one more thing to Tara? So I unmuted. Okay, great. So I work in the Department of Health in Rockland County. We have specifically a wastewater and water supply team. Those individuals are engineers, EITs or PEs, as well as PhDs. So eligibility wise, I echo what Julie said. I'm also not a personnel person, so I don't want to be misinformed on our county end. However, I do think connecting with professionals within the DOH, if that's really what you're interested in going into, there's great folks that are probably in Suffolk and Nassau or wherever you are and wherever you're interested in working. I think just even, doing a cold call, or I wouldn't say just drop by, but a cold call to the DOH and just asking or finding an email. If you go to a conference and find someone that does that work, that was something else I was going to recommend. Invest in yourself. Go to conferences, pay for it yourself if you have the means. If not, volunteer time. In my opinion, time is the most important thing that we all have. I found a lot of my careers through volunteering on boards. Some boards require you to pay, others don't. So I think that's just something to keep in mind too. My first board experience was fresh out of Stony Brook as an undergrad on the EMC, the Environmental Management Council. And through that work, I got an internship, then a consultant, then a full-time job role. So I really want to reinforce like boards are a great way to connect with people, workshops, certifications, conferences, all those things. If you don't invest in yourself, no one else will. So I just want to reinforce that too. And connect with your local folks. Yep.
Really quick, I want to second what Nicole's saying about investing in yourself. Our careers and our lives can't go anywhere if we're super burnt out, if we have health issues come up that could have been caught earlier. And I know a lot of us, when we're in the grind at Stony Brook specifically, we can very easily learn to tune out everything that we might be able to catch. So I would encourage you, as you are figuring out all of the unpredictable things that will happen to you personally and globally, nationally, as the years unfold, to always keep up with your maintenance, because you could have the best make and model in the world, but you're going to have a lot of costly repairs if you don't do your annual checkups. And then I will tack on, for folks that are doing like environmental field science, CCE Suffolk has has a few paid internships and a lot of different positions right now. I'm going to drop those in the chat. Unfortunately, we don't do visas, but I wanted to offer those as well. Thank you all so much.
Yeah, it is interesting. Oh, go on, Julie.
I just want to echo one more thing on the grad school path. So I got my master's in urban planning right after I graduated from Stony Brook. And then while I was doing that program, was working at an internship at New York City DOT. I encourage you, if you have the opportunity, apply for any and all internships that you can. I feel like it is an amazing way to make connections, use your Stony Brook connections, use whoever you meet. I think, a lot of folks on this call have said their paths have taken some windy turns. And that's often because you meet someone here who leads you in this direction, and then you meet someone else and they lead you in another direction. So I'd say keep your connections close. But I had gone to grad school right after, was doing this internship, and then got a full-time job, was working at DOT, and decided I needed some more technical experience, and decided to go back to school and get an engineering degree, and did that while I was working. And so I think, to Al's point, I don't think it's a terrible thing to take some time and work and kind of figure out what you want to be doing, what works for your career. It ended up being great that I had both a master's in urban planning and civil engineering, but um, I didn't know that I wanted all of this technical experience when I went to school right after school. So I think there is something to be said about working a little bit first and then going to grad school.
I feel like a lot of you have touched upon this, but it's a question that I've had students often ask when we've had conversations like this. Um, what do you know now that you wish you had known when you were still a student? Like, what's that one thing where you went, if I'd known that, it would have made something easier going through. Um, any thoughts on that? Or even, I wish I'd known to have done X, Y, or Z, an experience or something along those lines. I see
think
some pondering.
yeah, a lot of fun. One thing that I don't know if it's like a regret exactly, but it's something I think differently about now. I think as an undergrad student, I focused a lot on like what are the topics, I'm interested in, and that's what school's for, is to engage in the content and the topic areas. Um, but I have found, in my career, it's so much more salient to also ask, yeah, but what do you want to be doing all day? Because, that's what you're going to find when you sort of make that school to professional pivot is your experience of a job has a lot more to do, maybe not more to do, but is at least equally important. So as you're reading job descriptions, think about that as you're talk to people. Maybe that's what I would actually learn is like people aren't scary. Talk to them. Careers are personal. Everybody's a person. And some of those questions around like, okay, but like, what do you actually do all day can be a lot easier to identify by just asking people who you aren't invested in like, oh, I've applied to a job and now I'm asking you. Just people that you meet, informational interviews. You're allowed to ask people just to go to coffee or have a Zoom call. Can I have 15 minutes of your time? Come with specific questions. Don't waste their time. But like that's something that helped me sort of sort that thing about like what are the options out there now that I know I'm interested in like climate and environmental justice issues. Okay, but what does that mean? What does that look like day to day?
Yeah, and I guess to echo that, I'm in a very specific job. There are not many people who culture phytoplankton for an oyster breeding program or culture phytoplankton in general. And that's something that I got into in undergrad. I was glad to be under another PhD student's wing, and I enjoyed it. But also during undergrad, I did several other kind of opportunities with the Riverhead Foundation, or it used to be the Riverhead Foundation. I helped out with their sea turtle rehab work, as well as doing some remote underwater video cam data analyzing for the fish group, but as well as kind of making friends with a bunch of other people in SoMAS that have very differing career paths. And kind of understanding that we all, like how Al mentioned, like we all know what we love and what we want to do, but also what are you going to do day to day? So most of my work is kind of monotonous unless someone comes up to me with a question or I decide to go help out with another project, or collaborate with other agencies to work on monitoring and or teach other classes and stuff. And so it's again, like my position is very narrow, but I've been able to even talk with other people within our working group to try and expand my position's duties. And that even goes with before you finish school. Like even though I knew I liked phytoplankton, I liked harmful algae, I liked shellfish, I still wanted to make sure that that was the right path for me at that moment in time, and that can always change. And no matter what stage you are in your career path as well.
I think I would also mention that, similar to what somebody said earlier about not feeling like you get locked into a certain kind of topic. I was in the ecosystems and human impact major, which is very interdisciplinary. It's kind of covering a lot of different fields and not necessarily, you know, what is considered the hard sciences of chemistry or physics or um, ecology and things like that, or biology. And I remember as an undergraduate seeing a lot of very interesting labs in SoMAS, people doing very interesting things in, you know, eh, on projects that I would have loved to be involved in some capacity, but got a little intimidated by some of the, they were looking for statistics, people who had statistic experience, or, a lot of different skills that I felt like, oh, maybe maybe I couldn't really contribute here. I don't know how to do that. But looking back on it, that's what, being in university was for. Was to learn those skills. And I think, I did eventually get involved in Dr. Wright's lab. But, I had 2, 3 years before then at Stony Brook. And, granted, some of them were, some semesters were online because of COVID, but um, I think I would have loved to tell my, younger self to not be too intimidated to reach out to some of those professors, some of the graduate students at Stony Brook and just say, hey, I would love to get involved in this project. What kind of skills should I be learning? Or is there a way that I could, shadow you a little bit? So yeah, I think if I could do it over again, I would send a lot more emails to people.
That actually kind of ties into a question that was asked, specifically, I think, of Julie, because you went back for the master's in, I believe, civil engineering. Um, when you do a pivot like that, whether it's a job pivot, I would say, or a program pivot, concerns about skill sets that are needed. Technical skills that did you have those already, or kind of thinking about what do you need to pivot, whether it's, as I said, school wise or even job wise?
Um, So school-wise specifically, I mean, look into the programs that, you're interested in pivoting in, see, what you do have, what you would need. For myself, going from an urban planning degree with a focus in transportation to a civil engineering degree with a focus in transportation engineering, there was a lot of overlap. I had been working already in transportation and transportation engineering. So, I kind of found that while there were a couple of technical classes I did need to take as prereqs prior to getting accepted, um, it wasn't that much. So I was able to pivot, relatively easily. Um, I would say that I have found that having some hard technical skills has been really useful for my career and useful for getting jobs. So it's just something that you can point to say, like, I know how to do this, I know how to use this program. Um, so if you have the option of taking some technical classes at Stony Brook or doing an internship where they offer some technical training, I do think that is a really, really good skill to have. Doesn't always outweigh the soft skills, but I think is a really good add to your resume.
And that actually leads to a good question. You're all in some ways, very different positions, very different pathways. Um, Maybe if you can suggest whether they're soft skills or technical skills, something where you go, we'd really encourage, you know, students, whether you're undergraduate or graduate students, this would be a skill set to throw out. Um, I know often I hear things like about GIS, but I don't know. Like, again, we've heard a little bit about communication skills, I think has come up, but if anyone has anything specific, again, soft skills or technical.
I was going to actually mention this in the last question before Julie's, but the when I look back at my time in Stony Brook, the main thing that I find comes out a lot more than my, technical experience that I spend time developing there with coursework is all the work I did with some side leadership stuff that I was doing just for fun. That was things I wanted to engage with for engaging in the larger Stony Brook community, but also engaging on my own personal professional development, so not tied to like necessarily my career of interest. So I was, in university scholars. I was in, I was a orientation leader for many years. I was part of the student ambassador program for like a month before COVID hit. But I was able to engage with a lot of professionals at the university and that were really invested in those students developing leadership skills and professional skills. And from those, I felt really confident doing external opportunities that really help drive your career forward despite whatever technical skills you might have. So doing things like this, like where you're on panels, doing things where you're going and actually speaking at conferences or being comfortable with engaging folks and your peers. And I forget who mentioned this before, but reaching out to your contacts, but also search for people that are on your level career-wise, like those types of peers. Well, it's really, you thinking forward, you want to engage with people who, professors or people who are actually researching and doing those things. Also engage with people that are at your level, and they can really be a support network for you who are going through similar experiences, or as you disseminate across the world, are connections for you to lean on later in life. So, you know, those quote unquote soft skills, I feel like all end up being really, really important to set you apart from people that have technical skills, because technical skills are much easier to learn than those leadership and professional development skills.
I'm trying to make sure I get through all the questions. So if I've missed any questions, I do apologize. I have tried to group some of them um, together. And this has been some really great advice. So I would like to say, thank you for all of that. Does anyone in the audience, I know there was, I just saw one more question. And I'm going to kind of broaden it out a little bit because a couple other questions that came up around it. One of the questions is like, you're graduating, what should you be looking for, like title wise, job wise? Because titles have changed over the years. So maybe some of you can, in your different fields, speak to what, not just what the jobs, but what the titles are, because that's part of that search progress when people are just using Google and going, what is, or who's hiring in this kind of position. So I don't know if there's any tips you can give, whether it's in like the marine science or in transportation or conservation, thinking about those skills. And again, this may also differ, and I do wonder between, say, not-for-profit and government. Again, titles can be important.
I have one for that. This is something that, I don't know, I must have read about or somebody told me when I was in grad school that I do wish I had thought about in undergrad. You're sitting, you're just like, okay, let me just Google these keywords and see what comes up. A different approach is to try to familiarize yourself with where you're located or where you're trying to be located, and what are the organizations that are doing the kind of work that you want to be doing in that place. And then just look at their jobs that they have available, and just look at all. There was like some exercise I did where you had to like download all of the jobs, all of the jobs that they had posted, and like highlight the keywords that were attractive to you in all of them, even if at the end of the day that job would not be something you applied for. But that's how you start to key into like, what are the keywords for your profession specifically in that moment of time that you're looking. And also I think just generally like knowing those organizations is probably more effective than just kind of like a random Google search. So maybe zoom out a little bit to the organization level before you try to get into those jobs.
Yeah, just to echo that as well. At least at Oregon State University and some other agencies in Oregon, there are a lot of umbrella term positions. So my technical position title is faculty research assistant. My working title is the algae production research manager. And the reason that is just because different universities, different entities have different positions that certain people fit into, but that's not to say that you're not like I'm faculty research assistant, and then there's another genetics technician that has the same title as me, but we are completely different job duties. And that goes for other organizations as well in the private and public sector. But yeah, I think Al made a huge point of like finding out where you want to be or and finding those organizations and looking at how they organize their job titles and their hierarchy and where you would want to be and like what things you'd want to be doing.
I think also for the public sector, specifically for like New York City, New York State, there are often civil service tests or titles that you either need to be on a list for to get hired, or it actually just helps you learn about what jobs are coming up. I got this advice when I started working in government to take any and all civil service tests that you are eligible for. I would look, I can put some other links in the chat, but look on government websites, see what tests are coming out. It's a good way of just getting your foot in the door, and it's once you're in, it's a little bit easier to navigate the government system.
I know
In the
Johanna
not
just, oh, go on, Flynn, go on.
Sorry. I was just saying, for nonprofit folks, job titles can be really misleading. These smaller organizations don't have like standardized things like the government or like larger universities will. But generally, there was an entry level position at my nonprofit that had the word manager in it, and there's other ones that are like technician or specialist. So it can really run the gamut, and like Al was saying, really look at what they're actually asking versus potentially what the title is. And also don't be discouraged if you think just from the title that you're not, ready for this, or you're not who they're looking for. In that job description, they might, you know, line out exactly what they're looking for, and that could be you.
We did have a good question, and I know I think Johanna and Bridget had started to ask it, but um, for those getting ready to graduate, specific tools or experiences or programs that you would recommend, maybe from your own experience or maybe that you wish you had. I know GIS is one that I often bring up to students, and Johanna and Bridget both kind of put that one out. But are there any, whether it's a tool or maybe, a class topic, something where you go, this actually works across a lot of different avenues within your kind of larger field?
It's a mundane one, but Excel has been my best friend in every job that I've ever had. And I'm always like astounded by people scraping by without really understanding Excel. If you can just like watch some YouTube videos, or, I'm sure Stony Brook has a lot of resources that you don't necessarily have to like go and pay to do a grad school program or something, but just learn your Excel. Data management, I guess, more specifically, just like data hygiene. Even if you don't think you're like a coder or somebody's like interested in all of that, it's really just understanding information, and knowing it well enough to know what's good and bad information. Those kinds of things. Like if you don't think you're a technical person, just dip your toes in it. Do think it goes a long way.
I do
I
have
want
to
a
put a throw out
thousand
here just for
percent.
SELT. SELT does programs like that, and will teach you Excel and Word and things like that. They're short, they're often like a 30-minute learn, and my students come out going, we thought we knew the program and we failed the first test, because you only know what you always do. But Flynn, go on.
I just wanted to really reinforce what Al was saying, that like things you might find like terms is like data literacy, and like being able to parse like large data sets, just like and understand them and not feel discouraged by them. I think that is a huge skill, and it's part of the reason why why I was hired is because I leaned into more of like working in R and GIS and those types of skills, even though and I want to do restoration work. I want to be out in the field, but that data work has really supported me through my early career. And also, if you're wanting to go in the more scientific side of things, like academic, or you don't have to work in academia to be a scientist, but learning statistics, being confident in statistics, that is really, really important when it comes to like developing a scientific question and answering that scientific question, is being able to do the statistics at the end of the day. So if you become a master in statistics, that can really give you a leg up, I would say. So look at courses at the graduate level. Undergraduate level, just get your foundation in statistics. Stony Brook has amazing math departments. At the graduate levels, I don't know if biometry still exists, but that was a course that really gave me a leg up, is taking the biometry courses. So yeah.
I think I would also add, never in my kind of time as a student did I think that I would ever get a degree in business administration. And kind of more broadly, I think the skills that I learned, and I'm not saying everybody should go get an MBA, but there's a lot of kind of transferable skills that are, applicable in terms of organizational leadership and project management, that have served me kind of far beyond my professional path. They're things that have been really applicable in day-to-day life. And I recently just completed a kind of 4-week intensive course. I'll link it in the chat. It's called the Frankfurt Spring School on Conservation Project Management, and for those who are here who are really interested in conservation, and maybe you're really drawn to the field research aspect and everything. Um, the side of conservation project management is kind of the more nitty-gritty, kind of less attractive side of conservation, but it was kind of mind-blowing to realize how understated it is in terms of actually making sure a project from the planning stage is well thought out, the goals are well thought out, the stakeholders are well thought out. And it was, yeah, it was kind of eye-opening, and a lot of the stuff that I had already learned in my MBA was also applicable there. So I would say, regardless of what field you're in, you're probably, or your position that you might find yourself in, you're probably going to be managing a project at some point, maybe be managing and overseeing people. And so, yeah, I would say, project management and some of the more managerial administrative skills are also really good to learn.
We do have a hand raised, so Lang.
Yeah, hi, how you guys doing? So I have a question regarding a point that Feline had mentioned before. Um, it's like how do you best present your soft skills? Like would that be a critical factor for an employer to consider when they review your resume or when they like do the actual interview? Like how do you get people to appreciate those? Yeah.
For me, I mean, this turns up in very different situations, but a lot of it comes out in the interview for sure. But I think a lot of it comes out in those other skills that you list in your CV or resume. If you have a CV, you can list a lot of them, but obviously I had my technical, like applicable experiences like graduate school and all the work I did there. But at the end, when it's all the different things that I did for just like leadership development and working with other students and leading volunteer opportunities that I was really engaged with. Don't sell those opportunities short. I recently was, helping a partner organization hire for a position, and one of the students was like, "Oh, I didn't want to put in my, service work that I was doing, working at a coffee shop for the last, 6 months." I was like, no, that's like really valuable experience. It's showing that you can work with customers and like work with people. You don't know how many times I'm like in doing field work, I come across someone that's in rural Oregon, probably out hunting or fishing, and they just want to sit and talk about me. And that's how I engage with community members and my organization. It's a really big, important way that we're connecting with local folks in these areas. So the interview can tell you some of it, but a lot of it comes through in just what you're putting on your resume and the having a diverse plate that they can see on that resume that isn't just one track, going through for because I was someone who was on one track. I did undergraduate, then right into a master's degree, and then immediately into a career. So being able to have those like other things on the side that padded it out shows that you have that breadth over that depth. So I support Stony Brook letting you take, other classes, having you take, the other courses that you need to take. It really helps out.
Well, we are getting near the end of the time. I just wanted to ask if there was maybe if everyone had one last piece of advice or what they think is the most important piece of advice, even if it has already been said. If maybe we can throw that out to each of you to kind of give your at least in this moment last words of wisdom.
Maybe I
And I'll
could
just call
start.
out. Oh,
Oh,
okay.
sorry. Um, it has kind of been said already, but I think this is a lesson that I've been learning a little bit the hard way is that you can take your time, there's, there's nobody really has it all figured out at any point in their life. And I think, yeah, take your time, see what interests you. Like somebody said before, it's, what kind of work do you actually want to be doing every day that brings you meaning, that fulfills you. Um, and you might not know that for a while, and that's okay.
Yeah, and I'll agree with that as well. Like, I don't know if anyone was doing math, but I've graduated my undergrad in 2018, finished my master's in 2023. I started working in 2022. So it's not the normal track and like finishing grad school before you start work, and also not the normal timeline. Usually allegedly, people want to finish their master's pretty quick, but things come up in life, things come up in your degree. You never know what's going to happen. But just take it as you can and keep going with it and try and get as many opportunities as possible. I think the one thing I'm really glad that I did in undergrad is study abroad. I forgot to mention that earlier, but I studied abroad in Australia for a semester. I got to go to the Great Barrier Reef. And when you're in school, those opportunities will be the cheapest they ever will be. So definitely as take use of as many opportunities that you can while you're in school, while you're surrounded by other peers and other professors that have similar goals and similar interests.
I'll
There you
echo
go.
all the experiential learning. Sorry, Julie. What Darren was saying, do all the experiential learning you can. In my opinion, I found that that's how I learn best, and that exposure is really unique and exciting, especially through some of the programs listed through Stony Brook and being connected to the broader SUNY system. I have to say, I was able to study abroad at Otago in New Zealand, thanks to, I think, SUNY Oswego. And like my best friend who was at Oneonta was able to study through Stony Brook in Italy. So there's so many being connected to that broader SUNY network. I feel like not everyone always takes advantage of, and it's really wonderful. For other courses too, I was able to graduate on time, double majoring because of other connections to other SUNY schools and Stony Brook not offering that class that I needed at the time that fit with my schedule. So I think just being able to tap into that network. Also, there's no wrong path. I think I like put a lot of pressure on myself of like I needed to figure it out. If I do it wrong now, it's going to impact me by the time I'm 35 right now. By the time I'm 35, just trust in yourself, I think too, is also really grounding. You have a, good head on your shoulders. You have a good support system. You're clearly intelligent, and I think that's really important to just stay true to yourself too throughout that path.
I was going to say, really keep your connections throughout your entire career, time in school. Um, Utilize those connections in any way you can. And then I think, to kind of piggyback off of what Nicole was saying, like, trust yourself, I think is really important. Similarly, I was like, I'm very type A, very like, I had to have a plan with every single thing I did. And your plan really evolves, and it evolves usually for another opportunity that, you didn't maybe see coming. I think, also like feeling where you're at personally, and like if a job is not fitting your personal life, it's not going to work. So like kind of, meshing your personal life and your work life, and like trying to see that good balance, and what is feeling right is really important. So especially as you get older, and like personal life becomes really extra important. So yeah, I'll leave with that.
You know, because I'm towards the end of the line, getting a little bit more abstract here, but I agree with what everyone's saying, especially, your career path is your own. And it ties into what I want to say, where it's like, stay authentic to yourself, especially when you're going through interviews. You come across, everything comes in line when you're staying authentic to yourself. You come across as more confident. People feel like they're engaging with a person and not just the script or what someone told you was the best way to do something. And that can really deepen connections that you're gaining with professionally. And with that, if you're scared that your authentic self isn't going to get you the job, that jobs are two-way streets. They're trying to convince you to work for them just as much as you're trying to convince them to hire you. And so if you're being authentic to yourself and they don't want you, then that wasn't the place for you. So don't feel, dejected if you don't get hired because of that.
Well, I'd like to give a huge round of thank you to our panelists. I've loved hearing the journeys and getting to see you. Some of you I haven't seen in a couple of years. Some of you I've seen a little bit more recently. I also loved hearing, and I am going to throw a little bit of a bias, all the study abroad backgrounds. I did not realize the connections, Al. I did not realize you had also done Madagascar. So seeing where all of these journeys kind of started and where they ended up. Um, I do really want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart. And I hope all of our attendees appreciated this wonderful advice that was given out. And while I'm a day late, I do have to say happy Earth Day and happy Earthstock to everyone. So thank you, and thank you. And I look forward to chatting with all of you more going forward. So enjoy. Have a good night.